Welcome to the Pivot Point podcast. This season, I am focused on sharing stories and ideas from experts on diversity and inclusion. In this episode, I will share some ideas and insights from my guest expert, Julie Phillips. In this episode, we will unpack some actionable tips to leave it and think about and discuss with your organization. We share this information because inclusive leadership is a journey. It requires bravery and courage, and you do not have to do it alone. At Pivot Point, I believe we are stronger. Together, we are one. So, we're going to introduce Julie Phillips. She is with us after experiencing 25 years in corporate America as being a leader in IT consulting. She decided to start her own company, taking what she learned around hiring high quality people who are dependable, effective, and great at what they do. And she started AFIT. It's a WBE, Women Business Enterprise, located in Indianapolis, that is committed to being an ethical, responsible, and results driven company that provides information technology and medical services for government projects. To potential clients, AFIT offers a suite of services, including strategic planning, software development, and implementation of software packages from places like Salesforce, Microsoft, and others. Julie, I'm so excited to have you. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Julie. I appreciate the opportunity to talk about this very important topic.
Yeah. So we met on a panel. We were doing a diversity in technology symposium late last year. And it was really great for you to share your experiences from corporate America. And, we'll kind of share some of those stories and some of those lessons learned that'll carry forward to your successful launch of your business. We're talking entering year 3. That's a big deal. And so we're going to capture all of that. And specifically, we'll be talking more about gender diversity in today's episode. So listeners, especially women, key in and men as allies. Be sure to pick up some tips here as well. So Julie, just as we always do, we want to know your backstory. How did you get excited about a topic like diversity and inclusion? What led to your passion for it?
Yeah, Julie, I think it has a lot to do with just my background and experiences that I've had and the desire to want to really help others see things from a different point of view, as well as help those who are experiencing some gender biases on still today. Just some ideas on to help them so that they don't have to experience some of the same things that I went through. My background is I started out electrical engineering degree at Purdue, which is mostly all men at the time, and 25 years at a global very large consulting firm, which I have learned so much from, and it was a wonderful, wonderful career, great place to work. But even with all of that, there's biases that I've experienced along the way. I used to joke around that I'm a woman in a man's world, and I've been in lots and lots of meetings and experiences where I might have been the only female in the entire room. So I've learned a lot, and just want to pass on some of those learnings to other people.
Yeah. I know we met earlier at a Women in High Tech event earlier in the fall before our panel. And I know as we were talking about what to talk about in today's episode, you had shared those biases, those gender biases. You certainly felt them within the corporate America world. And many women do, and they don't know how to quite put their finger on it. Like, what's happening to me? Is this just because I'm a woman, or is this about something else? And then when you collectively understand this as an experience, what it's like to be female in a male-dominated workforce, which every workforce, I would argue, is male-dominated, at least at the top. And it's not to say we want it to be female dominated, but to feel more welcomed and feel a sense of belonging when you're experiencing these biases, it just feels uncomfortable, and we don't really know how to describe it. And so we kind of get these subtle signals we don't belong. And then, sure enough, we leave. Even if we serve our time, I served my time, my 12 years, and you served far longer than I did. But Julie, what were those biases? What are some examples of things you experienced?
Yeah, I think I've got several examples that might just kind of illustrate some of the things I experienced. So, for example, when I was ready to make kind of the equivalent of a partner in a firm, it was called something different at that time. But when I really wanted to get that promotion to that senior level. I had a conversation with a male that was at that level, and he asked me, well, just point blank, well, you have kids, so how is that going to work for you? And at the time, I just said, well, my husband, at the time stayed home full time, and he said, oh, well, that's like Susie Jones model. Because her husband stayed home. And, at the time I was like, well, yeah, right. I'm just like her, and she's made it work. And then I hung up the phone and I thought, well, hang on.
Right.
Why does it matter? B, why am I being compared to another woman versus, the man who was talking to me himself had a, wife who stayed home? And C, why is it any of his business how I handle my family life versus my work life? If this is something I'm qualified for, I'll figure out how to make it work at home. So that's one example of, something that happened that really stood out in my mind. Another is that, I found a lot of the women role models as and of course, 25 years is a long time. So early in my career, a lot of the women role models took on more kind of masculine qualities. And that was something that I heard you say in the Women in High Tech session, which really resonated to me. And I found that I myself had to change my style in order to be heard. So I had to be more direct. I had to be bolder. I had to, feel like I really just felt like I had to become this, person who I really wasn't, in order to have, the men at these top levels respect me and, think that I, was more like them, versus, where my, how I really like to, discuss things and work through things. And if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Those are a couple of examples. I actually have one more, which always has stood out to me, and I try and share this a lot with people. I remember being on a call, and you talk about lead like an ally, and I think in this case, I had to be that ally for a woman who was being discussed on a call about whether she was ready for promotion and a different role on a project, and the discussion was around her being home full time, or not traveling at the time. So she had small kids and was working in town, and they said, well, she's not going to want to travel because she has small kids. And I said, well, wait a minute, have you asked her? Have you let her make that decision? Because so often we assume, and I think that's what happened to me a lot. People assumed that I wouldn't want this or wouldn't want that because of my situation, versus asking and letting me make that decision.
Yeah. Those are great illustrations of the different types of bias. We know from the research on gender bias that the maternal wall is real. It's probably the number one area of bias that we're finding that women experience. And exactly like you said, we're asked questions about our family that men just aren't asked, and their parents too, right?
Right.
Do you have to have a stay-at-home dad to make it in the corporate America?
Right.
If you look up at the top of organizations, the women that are leading, that's most often the case. And as somebody that also has a husband that stays at home, I never advocate that's the answer. That is a very personal decision, and it works for us sometimes, and sometimes it doesn't. But you got to do what's right for you, and we shouldn't put the expectation that women, the only way you can succeed is if you have somebody at home running your house. You can't do both, right?
Right.
And then there's like, oh,
Right.
she's not a good
Exactly.
mom, and there's this shaming. I remember I experienced this on an airplane. A gentleman, turned to me and does the usual, what do you do? And, I engaged, and probably shouldn't have, but I engaged. And he said, wow, do you have kids? You're traveling, doing all this speaking and training. You have kids. And I said, well, yeah. He said, that must be really hard for you. And he just said it like that. And I looked at him, and
I
I grabbed my earbuds, and I said to him, no, but your judgment is very hard.
Oh, good for
I
you.
was proud of
That is a
myself.
good response.
Earbuds went
Yeah,
in.
I
He did
had
not talk
that
to me again.
happen. I had that happen so many times. In fact, I started to just use that as a qualifier. Yeah, I have kids and my husband stays home full time. And then you get the, oh, okay. But why do I have to describe that? Because I feel like you're judging me.
Well, and then the other side of the
Exactly.
bias, because all these they're double layered, right? You can't win either way, because even if you have the stay-at-home parents, you're not a bad mom. Then you have, oh wow, you must be doing very well. And it's almost like you're too successful. It's like, well, neither one
Right.
of these feels good to me right now. And what we know is the reason we have the bias is because we just haven't seen it enough for our brain to think it's normal. And so because
I think that's right.
they hadn't seen people like you, Julie, and they hadn't seen people like me, and they're thinking, "Huh, this doesn't fit into a category of behavior that I've recognized before. I've not seen someone like her before. I don't know what to do with this information. I can't fit it into a pattern or category. So I'm going to wrestle with it and ask weird questions." So
Yeah.
I remind
Yeah.
myself
Trying to understand it.
when you're
Yeah.
experiencing bias, it's almost always just someone's lack of understanding, or they really haven't seen something before. You're showing them something new. And then,
Or it's that unconscious bias based on how they've grown up and what they think is the norm.
yep.
And, or so I definitely understand that it's,
Hmm.
they're not really trying to judge. Some are, but some of it's just like trying to figure out, okay, wait, how does this fit into my norm on what
Well,
I think is it's supposed to be
exactly.
like.
And family roles growing up, and what you experience with gender growing up absolutely has a bearing on how you see gender in the workplace. And what we know, unconscious bias data, 95% of people have a gender bias. I have measured this from the good folks at Harvard. I have measured my implicit bias, and I am the 5% that doesn't. But I will say that even that isn't right. Like the goal is not to strip us of all of our bias, because sometimes I judge women that are not in the workforce, for example, or men that are not active fathers. So it's just, these roles, it's a complicated world, and there's no right or wrong answer. Just being aware. Um, and then
Absolutely.
the second area of bias you really highlighted nicely was the tightrope, the gender tightrope, right? I gotta be more direct. I gotta be more masculine, right? To fit in with the guys. And I know I experienced that in corporate America. I mean, I was wearing male clothing. I was being very dominant and direct and really changing who I was to fit the mold for what I saw behavior being recognized at the organization. And that's hard for women because, like you said, you didn't feel like your authentic self.
That's exactly right. And I definitely changed. And I still today often dress in what I call my work uniform. And a lot of it has to do being, I'm a blonde haired, blue eyed girl who, always felt like nobody assumed I had any brains. And so I, made sure that the way I dressed and, the jewelry I choose is very understated, and, try and wear black pants and a, reasonable shirt with a jacket of some kind and closed toed shoes, and, really try and dress the part,
Mhm.
mostly because I have experienced for so many years, people assuming that I, don't really know what I'm talking about just based on my appearance. I've gotten over that now. Now I don't really care.
Yeah.
But I definitely felt the need to do that for
Mhm.
many, many years.
I know men just don't have to think about that stuff of like what I'm wearing, makeup or no makeup, hair up or down.
Right.
Normally, I mean, I'm not saying
Right.
always, but usually, depends on where you are on the gender spectrum. I'm not putting any labels here, but there's so many thoughts that go into being a woman and how our appearance comes across. 3 years ago, I think I decided to stop wearing makeup. And it was a hard decision for me, but I think at the time I said, who am I wearing this for me or for other people? And the answer was clear.
Yeah.
It was other people. And, I've struggled. I've actually shaved the back of my head now. I have an undercut because my hair is really thick. I didn't do it for any sort of like statement. But if I wear my hair up and people see that on the back, they're like, whoa, your gender, you're not quite conforming to femininity. So there's these interesting kind of perceptions in this dance we have as women. We're constantly having to kind of navigate what our appearance is like, what mask we need to wear to fit into certain situations. And we don't want to be distracting with our appearance. So it's very, very interesting. It reminds me of as we're recording this, we're close to the Super Bowl of 2020, which I'm certain people will keep talking about, Julie, as this episode airs. The halftime show had such an interesting dynamic to it. So two Latina women, dancing, wearing not a ton of clothing, just really people had this backlash effect of like, they shouldn't have done that. It wasn't family friendly. Regardless of where you stand on this issue, that's a very personal thing. The really interesting, what I call it, when you flip it to test it, last year's halftime show had Adam Levine, and he was not wearing a lot of clothing either, but no one responded that way. And I think
That's
no
a
matter what you
very good
think
point.
on this, but you look at it side by side in those images, you're like, whoa, why is the reaction so different? Because they're women, and probably because they're women
Mm-hmm.
of color too. So double. But we don't judge white men the same way. They have so much leeway to appear how they want.
Absolutely.
Uh,
100% agree.
I'm
And
curious.
I do ballroom dancing as a hobby, and so really watching them didn't bother me at all. I've looked at it as less athletic and
I know, it's
and
impressive.
beautiful, and but yeah, everybody has different points of view based on where they're coming from, I suppose.
Yeah, I looked at it as, wow, a woman is 43 and 50 to dance like that. I
That's
was just
exactly the
impressed.
way I was looking at it.
I cannot dance that way, nor have I ever been able to, but those days are definitely not happening for me. But oh gosh. Well, Julie, I know you have a lot of kind of stories from the workplace and experiences you've had. If you could bring it home for our listeners, especially women leaders in corporate America that are wanting to climb the ladder and wrestling with the biases and the things that you've been talking about. Do you have a story or an example of something you've seen, yourself or another woman be successful amidst these challenges?
Yeah, I think even just for myself, what eventually I came to learn is to be comfortable in my own skin and become my authentic self. And a lot of that just has to do with gaining confidence. And I think so often women, in many women, not all, but many women, suffer from just having a lack of confidence,
Mm-hmm.
and that impacts how they come across or where they might sit in the room. I mean, there were many times, even when I was in a leadership position, where I didn't necessarily sit at the table. I still wanted to be kind of in the background, and so I think really it's about learning more about yourself and being comfortable with who you are, and your own leadership styles, because all leadership styles can be successful if you're doing things in the right way for the right reasons for yourself and for others, and keeping others in mind, and
Yep.
ethical and integrity and all that. So
Mm-hmm.
so I would just say, learn how to be confident in who you are, and do good work and do the right things for the right reasons, and success will come your way.
Yeah. Yeah. That authenticity, I talk about authentic confidence a lot with women. And sometimes it's knowing who you are, and it's also knowing who you're not. I think a lot of times as women, we're so
Yeah.
socialized to be pleasing and to be everything to everybody and always say yes, that you end up just saying no to yourself. And it's okay. It's so freeing to just let go of stuff. When I stopped pretending to be good at project management, oh, it was such a freeing experience, right? Like, I'm not good at details. Yay. Everyone knew that anyway, but I claimed it. And I'll tell people I can still do. It's not that I don't think details are important. My own mind doesn't work that way. Here's where I'm going to be best leveraged, facilitating conversations, speaking and marketing, writing, those types of activities. Those are the things I'm really good at and I enjoy doing. And so for women out there, Julie, great words of wisdom here. Know yourself, like know who you are and articulate that to others. It is not self-promotion. It's really let people know what
Right.
your gifts are. They want to know. They want to know more about you. It's absolutely okay to share that with others.
Absolutely. I think that's really well said.
Well,
It's taking your strengths, and you're going to be happiest doing work that goes towards your strengths and what you
yeah.
enjoy doing. and
Yep.
you're going to do a better job than trying to do something that you're being told you should do
Mm-hmm.
and you don't really enjoy it. I mean, I remember being in a client meeting where we were negotiating and I did what I thought my boss wanted me to do. And it went against what I felt was the right thing to do, but I did it anyway. And oh, it was a disaster.
Mm-hmm.
It was a
Yeah.
complete disaster. And so, we've got good instincts. We just need to trust our instincts.
Yep. Trust your gut, right? You can get comfortable saying what's
Yep,
on your mind as women. If you feel it, like there's something there, say it. And trying to please everyone, you end up pleasing no one, like in that example. Um,
exactly.
well, Julie, thanks so much for sharing your experiences, your stories. Love the conversation on bias and confidence, especially for women. So, thinking about this subject, thinking about diversity and inclusion and women as leaders, knowing we're far ways off with both of those in corporate America, what would you offer to our listeners? One nugget, one thing they could do with this conversation today.
Well, I think for as a listener who is wanting to figure out some of the things that we talked about for themselves, I think the one thing that they can do is what we talked about, which is, really get comfortable in your own skin and try to, try things out by voicing more what you're thinking and providing that to others and see what works and what doesn't work and learn from it. I think for those who are already maybe in a leadership position, the one thing I would recommend is looking for those you can advocate for. Like you wrote the book, Lead Like an Ally, that talks about, we need to have people in the room who are making decisions about, promotions and whatnot, looking for, having that person that's there for them. So look for people that you believe in, that you can
Hmm.
advocate for and coach and mentor, to just keep passing the
Yeah.
torch, helping others.
Well, especially those that are different than you, right? You're going to learn way
Right.
more and they need the help more. That's how you can really be an
Exactly.
ally. And I realize that just in my own diversification of who I mentor and sponsor and advocate for, traditionally it's been a lot of white women. And I've got to get better at that, right? I admittedly have not, until recently, mentored a man. And the same
Yeah.
goes. A lot of times, cross gender mentorships just don't happen. And so we've got to break down those silos. We've got to advocate for people that are different than us and be willing to listen to their stories because their stories probably going to be very different than what you're facing in the workplace. And that's cool. Like that's a fun conversation.
Yeah. And you can learn more by doing that. I totally agree. And that's something I agree. The thing is that we tend to gravitate towards people that are like us, just as
Hmm.
human beings. And the more that we start, meeting and spending more time, more quality time with people who are very different, more we realize, you know what, they have different might have different challenges or different backgrounds. We're
Hmm.
all human beings, all trying to do great things, and
Hmm.
uh, let's learn from each other.
Yep, that's what we always say. We're stronger together. So excellent, Julie. Well, thanks so much for sharing your words of wisdom with our listeners. And it's really good to hear those tales from the trenches of corporate America and the issues and challenges that women face today, but more importantly, the things we can do about it. So I always appreciate that positive take. Um, how can our listeners connect with you? How can they follow your work and get in touch?
Sure. Well, feel free to send me an email at julie@afitstaffing.com. So JULIE at AFITSTAFFING.com. I'm also on LinkedIn, Julie, my booth in parentheses, because I recently got married. Phillips is where you can find me on LinkedIn. So would be happy to connect with anybody who's interested in learning more or passionate about this topic as well.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, thanks so much for being on the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it and love all the work that you're doing for this.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Did you know that you can find all 5 seasons of our 50 plus episodes at nextpivotpoint.com? There, you can sign up for a complimentary 7-day preview of our new program, Lead Like an Ally, and order our new book, Lead Like an Ally. I appreciate you listening to this episode. Who do you know that needs to hear this message? Hit the share button or connect with me on LinkedIn. Julie Kratz, Kratz. I post every single day about this topic. I host this podcast because I believe we are stronger together. We are